All right, let's dive right in. The Bitcoin market right now is in the middle of a massive tug-of-war. You've got analysts on one side calling for a huge rally to $100,000. But at the exact same time, we're seeing these brutal, gut-wrenching sell-offs. So what is actually going on here? Let's break it all down. We're going to start with this central puzzle, right? This giant gap between what everyone thinks Bitcoin should be doing and what it's actually doing. It's a huge contradiction that has a lot of people scratching their heads. And here it is, plain and simple. On one hand, you have that magic number, that huge psychological target, $100,000. But then you look at reality and you see a 19% drop since November. So what gives? How can both of these things be true at the same time? Let's start by looking at the bull case. So let's talk about the optimistic side of the coin. A lot of very smart people believe there's a perfect storm brewing, a combination of factors that could seriously send Bitcoin's price rocketing towards that 100K mark. Okay, so the first and maybe the most important factor is the end of something called quantitative tightening, or QT. Now, the easiest way to think about QT is that the US Federal Reserve was basically using a giant financial vacuum cleaner, just sucking cash out of the system to fight off inflation. And here's the thing. They just switched the vacuum off. On December 1st, it officially stopped. The money drain is over. Now, the market, which is always looking ahead, is aggressively betting on future interest rate cuts. And what do rate cuts do? They pump even more cash back into the system. So where is all that cash going to go? Just look at this number, $8 trillion. That's a record amount of cash just sitting on the sidelines in US money market funds. As interest rates start to fall, boring old bonds get less attractive, and that mountain of cash is going to be looking for a new place to live, maybe in something with a little more risk and a lot more reward. But hey, it's not just about what the Fed is doing. You've got some serious cracks appearing in other markets that are pushing investors to look for an escape hatch. For example, there's growing concern about credit risk in the tech sector, and that's making big money investors hunt for scarce assets, like Bitcoin, to get away from that specific danger. And you don't have to take my word for it. This quote from a Citigroup report just nails the vibe right now. There's this growing anxiety in the traditional debt markets, and that feeling is what's fueling this big search for a safe place for all that capital. Okay, so that's the big picture, the macro case. Now let's zoom in a bit. There's one crypto analyst who's built this really interesting four-part model. And his argument is that even with the recent price drops, the absolute bottom for Bitcoin is already in the rearview mirror. So here are the four pillars he stands on. First, he's looking at how the price has actually rallied despite a flood of bad news. That's a classic bullish sign. Second, he points out that historically, these moments of intense fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD, they often mark the low point for the price. Third, he sees the money flowing out of funds starting to slow down and stabilize. And finally, it all ties back to that bigger picture of improving global liquidity that we just talked about. Let's just hang on that first pillar for a second, because it's based on this old trading saying. When a market gets hit with tons of negative headlines about regulations, companies selling, you name it, and the price still manages to climb, well, that is seen as an incredibly powerful bullish signal. It basically suggests that anyone who wanted to sell has already sold. And after crunching the numbers on all four of those pillars, this is what his model spits out. He's assigning a 91.5% probability that the bottom for Bitcoin's price is already in. I mean, that is a really bold, data-backed call. Which, of course, brings us to the elephant in the room. If the bull case is so strong, and the bottom is supposedly in, then what on earth caused that massive 19% plunge we just saw? It's time to flip the script and break down the headwinds that are pushing the price down. The first major issue was a brutal wave of forced selling. I mean, look at this. In just a 24-hour window, nearly $500 million in positions got liquidated. That's over 140,000 traders just wiped out. And the vast majority of them, $420 million worth, were people betting the price would go up. And at the very same time, the big institutional players were showing some serious signs of weakness. BlackRock's big Bitcoin ETF saw over $2.8 billion flow out over 6 straight weeks. The big money just wasn't there to buy up all the coins that were being sold. And all of this was happening inside this bubble of fear. You had worries that the Bank of Japan might raise rates, which would suck money out of the global system. You had uncertainty about US inflation. You even had MicroStrategy, one of Bitcoin's biggest corporate fans, warning they might have to sell some. Throw in the fact that miners are getting squeezed by high costs, and you had a perfect storm of negativity. So here we are. We've got these two incredibly powerful, totally opposite stories. So let's try to bring them both together and get a clear picture of where the market is right now, because it really is at a crossroads. And this right here, this really sums up that tug of war perfectly. On the left, you've got your bullish tailwinds pushing the price up, the Fed changing course, problems in other markets. But on the right, you've got these strong bearish headwinds pushing it down, all those liquidations, weak ETF demand, and just general global uncertainty. These two sides are clashing hard in real time. The whole point of breaking this down isn't to give you some crystal ball price prediction. It's to give you the tools to understand why the market is acting so crazy right now. It's about seeing those powerful forces that are pulling it in completely opposite directions. Which really leaves us with this one big question. Is Bitcoin on the edge of a perfect storm that's about to send it soaring, fueled by all these big picture tailwinds? Or is it just trapped in a storm of conflicting forces, getting whipped back and forth with no clear path forward? That is the billion-dollar question that the market is desperately trying to answer right now.